November 21st, 1990, the day of the Super Famicom launch in Japan. It was Nintendo's step into the new generation of 16-bit gaming, back when game companies openly diss each other in their commercials. With variants being released all over the world, it would end up being the king of the 4th console generation. There were 2 titles initially released in Japan, F-Zero and Super Mario World. Today, I would like to talk about the latter, with Super Mario World giving an entirely new spin to the classic plumber adventure thanks to the likes of Yoshi and the Cape Feather. This title has become one of the most beloved in the Super Mario series, and for good reason. Over the last 30 years, this game has been torn apart more than any other Mario title. With this game's less linear approach, people have repeatedly found new challenging ways to beat the game, but there's one specific goal I have in mind. Today, I want to dive into something people have been trying to piece together for years, the entire history of beating every single level in the game at once. This is the history of Super Mario World 96 Exit. With Super Mario World selling well over 20 million copies, it's fair to say that a huge percentage of people watching are familiar with this title to some degree, but I think it's best if I give you a brief rundown of the game. Super Mario World is the flagship Mario platformer for the Super Nintendo that spans across 9 different worlds and 72 different levels. Featuring capes, fire flowers, and Yoshi, most worlds also house alternate secret exits. Many are completed by putting a key in a keyhole, but there are some exceptions such as in ghost houses. With there being 24 secrets, this leads to a total of 96 possible exits to complete. Hence the run I want to talk about today, 96 Exit, being the 100% category in Super Mario World. I already know I'll get a few people trying to pull a gotcha, so let me quickly get some things out of the way. Storter, what about the Dragon Coins and Moons? Well, if you want to go down that route, Lunar Dragon is a category which is 96 Exit, but collects every Dragon Coin and Moon in the game. But that's another discussion. There isn't nearly as much to talk about between its smaller history and the banning of glitches. 2 more things. 1. Both front and back door of Bowser do not count, as it doesn't go towards your exit counter unless using an unintended glitch, which also leads me to 2. It is possible to get more than 96 exits thanks to how broken this game can get with glitches, but that is an explanation for another video. I could ramble about things all day, please let's talk about the actual game more. Before getting into what 96 Exit actually entails, I want to get some details out of the way. I feel like I should give basic technical explanations about how many things in this game works. Like most standard platformers, the 2 basic mechanics of Super Mario World are running and jumping. Once you become Big Mario thanks to a midway tape or mushroom, you get one huge bonus, being able to break blocks via spin jumping. This mechanic is huge, as multiple exits in the game require you to do just this. One step up is the Fire Flower. Besides the obvious fireballs that kill certain enemies, it can also be used to finish certain boss fights quicker. Morton, Ludwig, and Roy can be defeated in 1 hit instead of 3, thanks to 2 fireballs counting as said hits. This mechanic has been used in runs since the very beginning. The final important power-up is the Cape, which is possibly one of the most broken Mario power-ups ever. It gives you the ability to Cape Pump and Spin Fly, which makes many stages easier than ever before. Don't get it twisted though, there's a lot more than simply flying at the top of the screen to beat the level. There is a whole science to this. If cape pumping, there is a very obvious variance in flight speed if you pay attention to the in-game timer at the end of the level. Mario's speed while flying can alternate between, and including, 47 and 51. Players can manipulate and lock in a new speed by briefly tapping right while mid-flight. Ideally, you want to lock in 51 speed, and players primarily do this by paying attention to how much the screen jitters while in the air. It is possible to distinguish if you're going slower in the 47 to 49 range, or faster in the 50 to 51 range. IsoFrieze has a short video on the more technical side of this, which I will link below. You may wonder how much this matters, and well, take a look at one individual level. Some can be completed 3 in-game seconds faster with a cape, and for reference, a full in-game second is roughly 2/3 of a real second. This is thanks to the normal run speed averaging out around 48. Saving a second or 2 may not seem like much, but multiply that by the amount of levels you fly in, and it really starts to add up. Alright, are you still here? Good. I could ramble more about the details in this game, but I think it's best if we finally dive into The origins of 96 Exit. 9 worlds and 96 exits to power through. Where do we start? Well, there's quite a variety to sift through, between fortresses, castles, ghost houses, switch palaces, and much more. Beating every single exit is no simple feat, nonetheless in one sitting. The earliest documentation of anyone documenting a 96 exit time spans back to October 21st, 2004. Twin Galaxies, which used to be the primary source for gaming leaderboards, reported a person by the name Kelly Fluin achieving a 3-hour, 8-minute, and 34-second 96 gate record. Unfortunately, there is zero footage to back up this claim, but luckily that's not the biggest issue, because an even greater announcement was just around the corner. On February 2nd, 2005, Jason Baum, or GameCube04, uploaded a complete deathless playthrough beating every single exit possible, clocking in at 1 hour, 31 minutes, and 45 seconds. Time starts when Mario appears in the intro screen, and ends when Peach appears after defeating Bowser. This cuts the first claim time in half, and it's obvious a lot of work went into this. GameCube stated that he attempted the run a few hundred times over the span of 4 months, and took the time to develop some level of consistency across each level. Additionally, he came up with a route to best tackle all the worlds in the most optimal way seen at the time. Be aware, this is 2005. This run was completed 2 months before the first ever YouTube upload, so good luck easily finding someone else's gameplay online. In fact, by the time GameCube uploaded this run, there were only 2 other publicly documented Super Mario World runs by Scott Kessler. These ran the category that is now known today as 11 Exit, the fastest intended way to beat the game. If you'd like to know more about that, I suggest checking out my Quest for Sub 1 Minute video, but that's not the topic for today, which is 96 Exit. The route for this first ever run goes as follows. Complete all of World 1, carve out a path through World 2, which defeats the Green Switch Palace along the way, taking the right path in World 3, finishing all of Bottom Bridge and entering Star World, cleaning up half the levels to get to Special World quickly, cleaning up World 2, and then re-entering Star World after defeating Big Boo, finishing the rest of the world and warping back to World 3, and from that point, finishing every world going forward. For a first 100% run of this game, it's quite solid. The simple fact that it features 0 deaths over the course of 90 minutes makes it a very strong starting time. Additionally, it sets up many things that would continue to be used in future runs for quite a while, the most notable being the World 2 Green Switch route. The advantage of grabbing the switch early is getting access to more capes, which are housed in Green Switch blocks. This would go on to be dubbed Early Green Switch Route. The coolest strategy by far, which surprised me, was how the Special World level Tubular was handled. The intended strategy is to use P-balloon blocks supplied throughout the level in order to float across, but you actually don't need those. GameCube very casually was able to hop block to block, and even uses a Chuck football to bounce off at the very end. In Chocolate Island, a Yoshi was grabbed in Chocolate Island 2, which was then used in the following level thanks to a blue Koopa giving you flight ability. This Yoshi is then kept all the way till later in World 7. Speaking of World 7, the Firefly was used one more time to help with the Larry fight, which is then followed by something I was not expecting to see at all. When returning to Valley Bowser 2 to complete the secret exit, GameCube both ditches the blue Yoshi and intentionally takes damage to become small for the sandbar section. The only possible reason this was maybe done was to get through the sandbar section easier. I want to make it clear that you very much can get through this section with any power-up, which is why I'm shocked to see this in the first place. Overall though, this was a great run for 2005 speedrun standards, and I don't need to talk about every little bit of this run because, well, it's about what you'd expect. For both your and my sanity, I'm not going to be overly analyzing every detail in every run, since there's no need to. Since day one, a handful of levels are simply flown over with a cape, but trust me, there is so much more in store going forward. Over the following handful of years, multiple people would take a stab at Super Mario World, including Super Mario Bros. Legend Andrew G, but all of this action was happening with the shortest completion of the game. It's not until 2010 that we can find what would be the next competition in 96 Exit. A Japanese player by the name Menboo93 started streaming and uploading runs of Super Mario World onto the Japanese site Nico Video. Live streaming back in 2010 was quite a messy experience, but fortunately, Menboo did also locally upload personal bests to his channel. One of his first was a 96 Exit video claiming a 1:30:30, which is a solid minute faster than the only run notably published before. This run does a lot of the same things GameCube did, except better, obviously. The route is a bit more optimized in a few different places, such as only visiting Star World once instead of twice, and deciding to clear the left side of World 1 after Special World, since you warp back there anyways. There's also some similar strategies, such as using a Yoshi throughout Chocolate Island, and the same exact intentional small Mario approach to Valley Bowser 2. Seeing this suggests Menboo probably studied GameCube's now 5-year-old run at this point. This run still isn't close to clean, with Valley Bowser 1 being the most noticeable time loss, but there's a handful of really cool levels to watch. To access Top Secret Area, he did a tight quick fly around the booze, which is an early version of a strategy still used today. Donut Secret 1, Menboo accidentally double grabbed the shell and P-switch while swimming, had one of the most unnecessarily risky jumps in Wendy, and showcased a visual glitch in the Bowser fight by killing Bowser's balls with a ground cape slide. Last of all, the run features one of the most first ever notable level skips, with it taking place in Forest Ghost House. After leaving the tightly enclosed space starting the level, you can immediately fly to the left and get above the wall. This allows you to get to the same exact place you'd be if taking the intended doors. With this level being played twice, it's a very notable time save. Menboo would continue to post a multitude of runs throughout 2010, including in the American version of Super Mario Bros. 2, multiple improvements to the 11 exit world record, and most importantly for this discussion, another 96 exit time, and that time was 1:28:55. This consists of many of the same strategies seen before, such as Small Mario in the sandbar section of Valley Bowser 2. There's also some other familiar sights, such as the sketchy jump at the beginning of Wendy. I really thought this was a mistake the first time, but apparently this was an actual strategy. Another strategy I'm not sure about was in Vanilla Dome 2, where Menboo clipped inside the wall in the middle of the level. For what he was going for, it ended up being faster, but this is one of the easiest places to accidentally clip into, and it may have not been intentional. While this run did shave off a significant amount of time, there were still obvious spots of time loss, with a few K power-ups being lost along the way. Before I go forward, I also want to make it clear that around this period, leaderboards were still not established in the way we may think of them today, and it was not a simple task to piece together history before 2013. A huge reason for this was due to how segmented speedrun communities used to be in general. While players such as Andrew G and Scott Kessler were sharing times for North America, there was equally as much activity going on across the other side of the world, most notably Japan. While there may very much be earlier history, by 2009 we start to see the earliest easily documented runs revolving around the game, with people such as Yetsuba. Regarding 96 Exit, Menboo, who we already mentioned before, is the one notable player from Japan who tackled this category early on. On the American side, there was equally as much going on, with the most notable player at the time being Dram 55. With Japanese and American communities acknowledging each other but not fully interacting, the world record history can be confusing to piece together, but I believe I have put together what is publicly documented. If this is somehow wrong, feel free to whine at me, but I was able to create a timeline using YouTube and Twitch uploads, as well as forum posts on the forum Speed Demos archive. Dram in March of 2012 posted that he had finished a 1:28:57, which was only 2 seconds slower than Menboo's 2010 time. He pointed out that this would have been record if he was using a Japanese cartridge instead of an American one. This is due to two things that are faster on the Japanese version: save boxes on the overworld, and Switch Palace cutscenes. The Japanese text leads to quicker overworld text boxes, and the Switch Palace cutscenes fade out earlier. With tons of save boxes and multiple Switch Palaces, this time difference comes out to roughly 20 seconds, which would have been more than enough to give Dram a new record. Fortunately for Dram, this wouldn't be his last 796 exit, but before we talk about that, Menboo was still going strong. Menboo had started the year with a healthy mix of games and categories, but on July 16th he would come back with his biggest time cut yet in 96, 1:26:45, a close to 2-minute improvement. Quite significant for something that had already had a lot of time chopped off of. This run deserves to be analyzed heavily. As early as World 2, we already see a myriad of improvements versus before. In Donut Plains 2, he takes advantage of spin flying and gets in the pipe as soon as possible for both exits. In Donut Plains 3, he immediately runs and jumps right to get flight instead of going to the left. And the biggest by far was in Morton's Castle, where he spin flew throughout the second half. This is the earliest documented version of what players would eventually name Morton Fly. In both Vanilla Dome 1 and 2, he performed a trick where if you time a cape dive bomb at the right time against the ceiling, you can stick to it. This would end up being dubbed Sticky Fly. I know, real creative name here. Vanilla Dome 3 finally saw the usage of the top right at the end instead of squeezing through all the piranhas. Moving to Star and Special World, a completely new route using Yoshi started to be used. When finishing the final exit of Star World 2, the blue baby Yoshi you can grab is fed the power up in your reserve box, and is used to make Special World a lot easier. Even in Star World 5, you can simply grab a Koopa to fly. This made levels such as Tubular and Awesome way easier than ever before. Menboo would then ditch this Yoshi and Mondo, since the rest of Special only required flying. After cleaning up World 2, Vanilla's Secret was done faster than ever before by carefully maneuvering via spin fly for both exits. After clearing Top Bridge, Ludwig had a heavier cape usage and took advantage of cape cancelling against Spike Balls and Potobos. The item usage in Force Evolution 2 was thought out a bit more than previously and aimed to keep a cape at all times. Starting the level, Menboo switched to a Fire Flower, used it to power through an Urchin, grab the floating cape, grab another Fire Flower in the level, and lastly, scroll the screen to manipulate Urchins later in the level. When playing the level to grab the second exit, the cape is switched back to. Similar to Ludwig, similar cape cancelling was also done in Forest Ghost House, making for a really quick level both times. Chocolate Island had some new things in store as well, such as Ghost House having a simple spin fly maneuver to quickly beat the final room, but more importantly, it did not grab Yoshi in Chocolate Island 2 anymore. In Chocolate Secret, they used the slopes in Room 2 to get P-Speed, which is exactly what is still done now. And Chocolate Island 3 became a flyover level, with the only thing to be aware of was not scraping against the pipes mid-flight. This room became the first to attempt getting P-Speed entering Chocolate Fort, which was successful for the beginning of Room 1. If it wasn't obvious already that the cape was understood more, Chocolate Island 4 became visually more interesting, with Menboo keeping flight through the very tight level. We get to see another attempt at the sketchy Wendy strategy, which fully demonstrates why I thought it was oddly risky to go for in the first place. Valley Ghost House is the most impressive level considering how old this run is, and uses strategies that are optimal to this day. It starts with spin flying in Room 1, and if you time your flight entering the door, you can preserve your flight and immediately start flying. This allows you to skip having to press the intended P-switch, which gives you a platform to run on. Lastly, in the final room, a spin fly is timed where if you're in the right position, you can hold down and slide through the tiny gap where the key is. The two strategies done here are door flying and sexy slide. The most interesting fact about the door fly here is that the strategy was very before its time, and wouldn't be heavily messed with in world record runs for this specific level again until 2015. I honestly had to make sure I was watching the correct run multiple times, because I was so shocked to see this used so early on. Larry was possibly one of the sloppiest levels, but to make up for that, he finally wasn't intentionally going small for Valley and Bowser 2. Additionally, a trick that was being done in Bowser for 11 exit was seen here as well. By hitting Bowser with a Mecha Koopa right as he is about to throw down one of his balls, you can completely skip this cycle. This is called Ball Skip. On top of this, you may notice the cape is being fully utilized here to get constant quick hits on Bowser, with this concept being dubbed Cape Kill. With everything I have just mentioned, you may see why the record was beaten by so much now. Dram was eager to officially get record, and when grinding more 96, he had switched from the American to the Japanese cart in order to get that 20 seconds of time save. Fortunately, Dram was in a pretty good position since he was going for a handful of strategies that Menboo had yet to use in his record. This starts as early as Donut Plains 2, where he used the same concept done by Menboo in Valley Ghost House. He was able to immediately get flight in the second room for both exits. His World 3 was faster than ever, with 2 flies in Vanilla Dome 3, the skips having to fully wait on the rafts. Getting flight speed quicker in Vanilla Dome 4, and spinning at the very beginning of Lemmy to manipulate where the Magic Koopa would spawn. In Star World 1, Dram took advantage of a strategy being done in 11 exit called Zips. Only 4 yellow spin blocks can actively spin at once, and by exploiting this, you can simply zip past most of these blocks. A completely different approach to Force Evolution 2 was done versus anything seen before. First off, Dram switched to Fire Flower in the previous level, and then did a damage boost at the beginning, while ditching Yoshi. Further into the level, he goes to a lower spot not previously used, and is able to use a raised corner in the ground to jump off Yoshi, and then re-grab him halfway through the wall, which gives you a clip. That's just the beginning though, because on the second visit, Dram immediately does the same idea, but at the very beginning, which allows him to skip the entire level. These two clips he did have both been dubbed Easy Clip and Hard Clip. Both clips can save the player the hassle of having to navigate the maze of fish and urchins, and the time save you can get out of these really varies on how fast you can complete the level normally. Doing so optimally is very hard, so having these clips is very useful. Easy clip tends to not really save time due to how out of the way it is, but hard clip, if done twice, can easily save you a double-digit amount of seconds. With this clip being new and not understood too well, Dram seemingly only wanted to try it once for this run, but it was still very much worth it since he immediately clipped in. You can see that leaving World 5, he was on a pace that would put him very close to a 125, but unfortunately he had a very costly death in Chocolate Ghost House. Fortunately he was able to maintain most of his later time save thanks to the slide in Ghost House and doing a faster beginning to Larry Room 2, which was done by scrolling the screen left. While he did lose a cape here, he still ended the room on a pretty good note, easily proving that he could still destroy this even more. With a death that cost 30 seconds sitting halfway through the run, Dram very much knew he had more to do for the category. Unfortunately, that gave us more activity for the end of 2012. Besides not dying in Chocolate Ghost House this time, Dram's next run on October 6 cleaned up a lot of the slop from before. Between not losing power-ups left and right, as well as minor optimizations such as skipping under a Crusher in Valley Ford, he was able to achieve a 125.43, a nearly 1 minute improvement. While there were some glaring mistakes such as losing upwards of 8 seconds in Star World 1, and getting kicked off Yoshi multiple times in Sunken Ghost Ship, this was the exact kind of run that Dram was trying to achieve the month before. But hold on to your seats, because he wasn't completely done for the year. Only a month later on November 18th, Dram came back with a 125.19 and was back with completely new strats. The first was in Vanilla Dome 1, where he entered the level with a Yoshi and used a blue shell to fly under the level. He was able to skip the entire second room, but he ultimately was a bit slower. It didn't help that he bonked while trying to stay under the level. Following that up, he performed a Yoshi clip in Vanilla Dome 2 that is similar to the Forest Evolution. This allows you to immediately reach the area with the key and keyhole. This can save you around 10 to 15 seconds. In other places, he balanced out his time save, such as having a way faster Star World than before, but then losing a little bit of that to things such as falling off Yoshi right away entering Mondo. What saved even more time was Dram going for Hard Clip in Force of Illusion 2 both times finally, but he switched between Fire Flower and Cape anyways, so the time save may not be as much as you'd think. Additionally, he was the first to keep his flight through the entirety of Room 1 in Chocolate Fort, and had a still sloppy, but faster, Room 2 in Larry. Honestly, at this point the run was looking overly clean, and it felt like the main things to do at the moment were to clean up some of the silly mistakes in between. What was Dram supposed to do from here? Inching towards 2013, Super Mario World specifically started to become more properly recorded as a speedrun due to some of the oldest surviving leaderboard documentation appearing around this time. In January 2013, we can see a handful of goals were sprawling with competition, the most notable being any %, or what would be renamed 11 Exit. But on top of that, there was a slew of categories such as beating all castles, finishing without using Star World, and low %, which was using 0 power-ups. This does fortunately mean that going forward, the record history is very well documented, and I am very confident of the accuracy of everything from here on out. Only a month later on February 1st, Dram would replace his 125 time on the leaderboard with another major improvement. The newest major trick added this time was spawning Yoshi wings early in Vanilla Dome 1. It's quite easy to duplicate blocks in this game, and it was finally figured out that this could be used to further glitch different levels. In this case, if you duplicate a block over a Yoshi coin, and then collect said coin, you can then go for another duplication to the right, which will then spawn in Yoshi wings. All that is left to do is simply collect the wings, and it works just like Yoshi wings in levels where it is intended. You immediately move on to the next level. Unfortunately, Dram had a lot of trouble doing this fast, but he still finished 8 in-game seconds faster than this previous run, and additionally, you don't have to go through the level-ending fanfare. The only thing that this glitch changed to the routing was the fact that you had to pick up a Yoshi in Donut Plains 4, which fortunately is not too hard. This was followed up with another quick Vanilla Dome 2 clip, and later on he did both Forest of Illusion 2 clips, this time not randomly switching power-ups in between. One more really cool trick was in Sunken Ghost Ship, where Dram was able to despawn one of the boo rings, which makes it less of a hassle to finish the room. The way this is done is spawning in the boo ring while the boo cloud already on screen is despawning. At the beginning of the room, Dram briefly got stuck, but was still able to time it by scrolling the screen. With all of this, he finished with a 124.35, doing way more than simply breaking into the next minute barrier. This run still had some sloppy segments, such as a close call on Roy, and struggling in Chocolate Fort, but that didn't matter. Dram was able to pick up extra time with minor optimizations between many levels, such as a quicker takeoff in Donut Ghost House, cleaner swimming in Vanilla Dome 2, jumping off the head of a Blarg in Vanilla Dome 3 to skip part of the raft section, and using a cape cancel to spin jump off a Boo Snake in Chocolate Ghost House. Dram continued to be on a hot streak in the category after just setting another monumental time, and was still doing attempts right after his 40-second improvement. In fact, just 3 days later, he had another impressive run. He was able to get wings in Vanilla Dome 1, about 10 seconds faster this time, had the fastest Room 1 in Chocolate Fort yet, and didn't need to scroll for Sunken Ghost Ship Boomerang despawn. This netted him a 5-second improvement with a 124.30. So why was this only 5 seconds better with so many major improvements? Well, the rest of the run had a lot of mistakes. Most notably, Dram struggled to clip 3 times in Vanilla Dome 2, and lost his cape 3 times between Vanilla Secret 1, Forest Fort, and Larry. Fortunately, he was able to minimize some of this time loss, thanks to some other time saves, such as having the best Star World 1 zips in any of his personal bests to date so far. The last interesting thing to note is that every run up until now stopped to grab a Fire Flower in Vanilla Dome 1, which is used to have a quicker Ludwig fight. Dram this run experimented and picked one up quickly at the end of Yoshi's Island 1. This wouldn't be done going forward, but I thought that was cool. With Dram riding the high of pushing the category to unforeseen limits, there didn't seem to be any competition to keep up. The closest person was still Menboo, who unfortunately seemed to stop playing around 2013, and was only doing 11 exit and all castles runs. I will say one of the biggest headaches I dealt with while researching was trying to piece together Menboo's last possible personal best and 96 exit. If you go to the Super Mario World leaderboard, you will see a 124.23 by Menboo with no video or date. So how did this get here? Honestly, I've been trying to figure that out. No such video exists on his Nico video, nor a linked Twitch account which I was able to find. Menboo did seem to have another Twitch account under the name Menboo93, but that account has been shut down. He does have a Twitter, but that account has been completely locked, and many mid-2010 Mario World runners even reported being blocked by him for no reason. I even spent way too much time digging through a Japanese leaderboard I was able to find, and Menboo doesn't even seem to exist under 96 exit. I do feel pretty confident that Menboo never got the record again, but I had to vent my frustration sifting through this. Where did this come from? Oh, Dram, yeah. He pursued this run more and had a slightly bigger improvement on April 26. He was 2 seconds faster in Vanilla Dome 1, didn't mess up Vanilla Dome 2 clip this time, and this time decided to pick up the Ludwig Fire Flower and Groovy, which was definitely the best strategy yet, since he virtually didn't have to slow down. 124.18 was the new best time to beat, with this being well over 2 minutes faster than what Dram was able to set not even a year prior. He did have some glaring mistakes such as a slightly slow Star World 1, and lost a ton of time with a missed hit and cape loss in Bowser, but Dram seemed to finally have a time that he was proud to let sit on top. He would over the following 2 years tackle other runs such as 11 exit and low percent, but besides that, it was time to let someone else put in the work. By the middle of 2013, there were a handful of promising new runners, and one that I very much need to introduce you to is LinkDead. Rocking the Super Mario pajama pants since day one, LinkDead started heavily running Super Mario World at the beginning of 2013, and by May, had already achieved a 96 time that would have been record if done only half a year earlier. Entering June, he got a 124.33, which was his closest yet, and with 96 being one of those categories where you can always save time everywhere, he kept pushing to see what else he could do. Only a month later on July 6, he finally pulled off a run that was able to compete with Dram. A new trick he added was in the Special World level Gnarly, where he went for wings, with the idea being the same as Vanilla Dome 1. Unfortunately, he struggled quite a lot here, and very much did not save time with it. Special World also saw a different spot to grab the Fire Flower for Ludwig, this time in Awesome. He also did a trick in Chocolate Island 1, where with the right spin fly timing into a pipe mid-level, you will then be shot out of the pipe and fly way faster. How much faster? Well, if you remember me saying earlier, the fastest normal flight speed is 51, and this pipe here will shoot you out with a speed of 64. This isn't faster by much since you have to deal with a pipe transition, but with the drastic increase in speed, it still nets to a second. There was also a slight route change in Force Evolution, where instead of doing both Force Evolution 2 clips back to back, he instead did the first clip, went back to Force Evolution 1 and got a Yoshi while doing the secret, did one of the Ghost House exits, and then came back down for clip number 2. Besides that, he was mostly able to play just as, if not better than Dram. With not having a nearly as slow Bowser fight, he got a 1:24.17, a 1 second improvement to the record. This really ended up being a case of shifting around where the time loss was. Besides gnarly wings, he also lost his cape in Lemmy, had not the most ideal Star World 1, and slightly struggled with Valley Ghost House. The second name I have to tell you about is xPaco5, a player that started right around the same time as LinkDead. By the time LinkDead had set the new record, Paco had already achieved a 1:25 time, and also had a respectable any percent, or now 11 exit, personal best. Later in 2013, he got 2 more improvements to his 96 best, with his second one being a 1:24.35, what Dram had achieved earlier in the year. He clearly had thrown up some really great times, and his last one I mentioned lost 20 seconds in the final split. This meant that he very much could have just beaten the record if it wasn't for that. Only a day after this run on October 2nd, Paco did even more runs, and did what he wasn't able to do the day before. He was able to keep up the pace in earlier worlds, with really great wings balancing out a failed clip attempt, and was able to do what LinkDead couldn't do before. Paco was able to finish 11 in-game seconds faster than LinkDead and Gnarly, thanks to a way cleaner execution. This time Paco very much saved time doing this versus normally beating the level. For the rest of the run, most strategies were the same, such as opting for the new pipe fly, but there were also some glaring issues. There was a mix of minor mistakes such as slight slowdown and chocolate ford, as well as major blunders such as Room 1 and Larry. Nonetheless, it was still enough to edge out LinkDead, finishing with a 1:24.11. He had more than proved that breaking into the 1:23 range was more than possible, and if Larry hadn't thrown him off, it would have happened. Unfortunately though, that was meant for another day, and also another person. The third and final new face of the 2013 era I need to introduce you to is Kakusho. He started playing at the exact same time as the previous 2 players, and dipped his toes into a mix of different series such as Final Fantasy and The Legend of Zelda. His most prominent game by far though, I don't think I need to say. His most prominent category by far was 96, and by the very end of 2013 had gotten the record for himself. Kakusho displayed one of the highest levels of consistency so far in regards to the tricks on the run. Awesome Vanilla Dome wings and clip, the fastest Gnarly done in a run yet, and the only notable mistake in this regard was having to wait a cycle for one of the forest clips. There's one trick he did that I didn't mention though, and that was in Valley Bowser 2. In the sandbar section, Kakusho performed a trick which involves ducking and spin jumping at just the right time, which allows you to clip inside and skip an entire cycle of waiting. This is quite risky to do at the very end of the run, as if you spin jump too early, you will get crushed, and it's only a 2-frame window. With it saving roughly 12 seconds, the award outweighed the risk. Sure, this run had some struggles towards the end, such as falling off of Yoshi in Sunken Ghost Ship, and struggling in Valley Bowser 1, but the overall clean execution across the board, and the new sandbar clip, was more than enough to break a new barrier. 1:23.52. What a way to end the year! After a new minute barrier was pushed using a huge level-breaking glitch, the category was in an interesting situation. There were now a handful of people more than capable of taking it back if they wanted, and it really came down to cleaning up the run even further. Exactly a month later on January 31st, 2014, one person was able to do just that, our pajamaed friend, LinkDead. This run took Kakusho's lead by adding in Sandbar Clip and minimized all the struggles he had. Sure, LinkDead did have a slight hiccup in Donut Secret 1, and Larry, as well as missing a cycle in Force Illusion 2, but it still wasn't nearly as much as he was able to end with a 1:23.37, already pushing towards the halfway mark to the next minute barrier, 1:22. LinkDead's run had proved to be something that finally calmed down the category, as the rest of 2014 saw nothing new at the top, and it would take about 18 months for that to change. By the middle of 2013, a new runner by the name Green Death Flavor started to upload some runs across different categories, but it wasn't until the very end of the year that they finally tackled 96 Exit. Their first run was just over 2 hours, and wouldn't touch 96 too much more for a decent bit. He mostly focused on the any percent category that would become Modern 11 Exit using the Cloud Glitch, and then in July 2014, we started to see him really start chomping down on his 96 personal best. By the end of the year, he was able to pump out a lower 1:25 time, and we can see further improvements into the new year. In fact, the improvement was quite drastic because by March he had already slipped all the way down to a low 1:24, comfortably putting him in the top 5. It was the perfect opportunity for him to continue climbing up the board. Bit by bit, he continued to chop off time. In May, he got one of the lowest 1:24 times you could imagine, and in June followed that up by squeezing out a 1:23. This easily put him in the top 3. If he added in Sandbar Clip and cleaned some other things up, he very comfortably could be the new king of 96. He would continue his journey further into the year, and in July had a run that struggled with Vanilla Dome 1, missed 2 cycles in Force Evolution 2, missed flight in the following level, and didn't do Sandbar. Yet he ended with a 123.28, a new record. How was that possible? Well, outside of the few mistakes I just mentioned, this run is quite pristine. Levels that most records previously may have been sloppy with, such as Vanilla's Secret 1 or Chocolate Fort, were perfect here. Combine that with 2 new tricks here, the most notable being in Tubular. It was found that you can use the P-switch in the level to spawn Yoshi wings. By chucking it inside the P-balloon block, it's simpler than you may expect. Sometimes you have to scroll the screen to get the P-switch in the right position, but in this case, it immediately worked. All of what I just said really tied together a clean run, and the category for a bit sat in a similar situation as before. A month later, Truman notably became the 4th ever person to get a 123, but the rest of 2015 was pretty quiet. Or was it? Jumping back to 2013, another player across different categories popped up on the leaderboards by the name of Akisto. Unfortunately, their history pre-2015 is basically wiped, but starting in mid-2015, we do at least get a few miscellaneous clips. One in August shows 96 exit splits on the side that show a 124 time, which demonstrates that within the past year, he majorly grinded the category. His first earliest still available 96 exit recording is in December 2015, and would you look at that? It's a new world record. This run is completely different from any run seen before, as Akisto completely came up with a new route for the whole run. Dubbed Akisto Route, it aims to get annoying tricks such as the clips in Vanilla Dome and Force of Illusion out of the way as quickly as possible. To do this, he takes a route through World 2 that beats both ghost houses, presses the red switch, and then goes to the left in World 3, completes Top Bridge in Worlds 5 and 6, beats Larry's Castle, enters Special World, cleans out the rest of the worlds 1, 2, and 3, gets through Bottom Bridge and Star World, and finally warps back to World 7 to finish the last few levels. This run has been calculated to be roughly 5 seconds slower, but Akisto has stuck with it. In fact, he has been the only top runner to properly grind out runs with this completely different path. Using this route, he got a 123.24. The route change led to a few different strategies, such as using a springboard at the end of Morton, and using a blue shell to fly over the raft section in Vanilla Dome 3. We also see Akisto finally bringing back the Doorfly in Valley Ghost House that was abandoned since Menboo. The biggest controversy here may be the fact that over 5 minutes of this run is missing due to the capture card feed disconnecting during part of World 7 and Special World. In fact, there is further questionability with Akisto's runs, since his next 2 records he achieved in 2016 do not have any surviving footage. It does seem that at one point YouTube uploads existed, but are now unavailable. Even asking the source himself, he states he does not have any more footage of his 123.17 on May 7th, or 123.10 on July 14th. Fortunately, he would get one more record on November 10th, and of course once again uses his new route. Moving from his 123.24, he cleaned up a lot of things, such as Vanilla Dome 2 clip, which he previously had a brief struggle with. The most notable new addition here is a new set of wings, this time in Force of Illusion 1. While on Yoshi, you can tongue a green Koopa and use it to duplicate a P-balloon block. It's the same core idea as the block in Tubular. Akisto had actually tried this in his last run with footage, but failed it. This one came out to a 123.04, and would be short-lived, as prior competition was still lurking. I may have been talking about Akisto for quite a bit, but don't get it twisted. Green Death Flavor didn't spontaneously disappear after getting his 123.28. In fact, besides continuing to run Super Mario World, he was also running Mario 1 and 2. At the start of 2016, we can see a ton of highlights from his sessions, with some being a really funny wall jump in Special World, and losing a potential world record all the way in Valley of Bowser 2. Possibly the biggest thing he did in this time period was a new trick dubbed Groovy Boss Kill. To sum this up, you can spawn a Koopa boss sprite inside the level, and defeat it to end said level immediately. I will leave links to a full technical explanation of how this is possible in the description, but 2 very important components to be aware about are, 1. The double tongue glitch, which requires Yoshi to release his tongue on the exact same frame the game freezes from grabbing a power-up. 2. Stunning a sliding Koopa, which can be used to spawn the boss sprite. This was one of the first times anyone ever did this in a proper run, and going forward this became a trick many players started to mess with in their attempts. With all those achievements, on December 16th, Green Death Flavor finally got what he wanted after many personal bests, and got a new 1-second world record of 123.03. This run introduces yet another new route, which is a lot closer to early Green Switch. The route is actually the same, except you do what Akisto Route does in World 2. Complete Donut Secret House. What's the purpose of this? Well, watch any 11 exit speedrun. You may notice that the boomerang position is always exactly the same. This is because the boomerang position is based on a global timer running in the game, and is based on the position of wherever the last boomerang was that you went past. This is why previously with Green Switch Route, every runner's ghost house here was just slightly different. You may notice some runners having to briefly adjust on the fly to prevent getting hit. This is due to the position being based on how you played Vanilla Ghost House, which also features boomerangs. Getting that out of the way, this run features some other tiny optimizations such as item flying with the P-switch in Vanilla Ghost House, and also tried to go for the new groovy boss kill, which unfortunately didn't happen. He also got Force of Illusion 1 wings, but earlier in the level was trying to go for a quicker Yoshi grab and lost his cape in the process. Additionally, Sunken Ghost Ship saw another hiccup, with Yoshi getting stuck, preventing a boomerang despawn. Having these mistakes prevented the 122, but at this rate it was very likely going to be the next record time. So the only question was, who would it be? So would it be Green Death flavor again? Maybe Akisto once more? Or maybe even one of the other 2013 runners? Nope. Let's rewind to 2015. In 2015, No Star World became a pretty popular category to run since there was a tournament being hosted for it starting in June. Heck, that's how I started running the game, and Sten was the same. His initial history is completely littered with the category, but eventually he would touch some of the other runs this game had to offer. And of course, 96 was one of them. You can see one of his oldest attempts being over 2 hours, but by the end of the year was already a 125. He did mix in some other runs such as Mario 3 and Sunshine, but would continue to lower his 96 personal best in April 2016. In April, he got a 124, in August he got a 123, and then in December, he had a similar run to Green Death flavor. Early Ghost House was the go-to route at this point, and he failed an attempt at Groovy Boss Kill as well. A huge new trick was in Vanilla Dome 3, being able to skip the entire raft. Sure, Akisto was able to easily do this with a blue shell on his route, but that's actually slower than what can be done here. By dismounting Yoshi against the ceiling and immediately getting back on him, you can stick out his tongue to do a cape fly while riding him. Besides needing to stick out his tongue constantly, you cape hump the same way you would without a Yoshi. This can save you a few seconds versus the blarg skip strategy that had been used for quite a while at this point. His run also featured other things you may expect at this point, such as Force of Illusion 1 wings, but sadly did have some choke points such as having a minor mishap in Blue Switch, and accidentally normal flying instead of spin flying in Valley of Bowser Fort. Nonetheless, all of this combined together was just enough for a 122, getting it by half a second. The ways this category had been stretched really show if you think about how it took less than a year to go from a 124 to a 123, but nearly 3 years to go from a 123 to a 122. While the first ever 122 was heavily celebrated, this didn't mean that competition, or the category itself, was completely settled. Sten's 122 would only last for a month, because on January 27th, we got this. First ever record to successfully pull off Groovy Boss Kill. In fact, by this point, the same concept was known to be possible in Cookie Mountain as well, which is why Green Death Flavor tried to execute it, but failed. Additionally, he still went for Blarg Skip instead of skipping the raft in Vanilla Dome 3. On top of that, he had a handful of mistakes in late game. He lost a cape in Chocolate Fort, missed Sexy Slide on his first try, and lost Flight in Larry. To end it off, he didn't even do anything in the Valley of Bowser 2 sandbar. He simply wanted to squeeze out a new record. With his early game being really strong with things like amazing zip execution, and of course the new boss kill, he was still able to squeeze out a new best time with a 122.58, being not even a full second faster than Sten. In the span of 3 months, 3 different people had held the record here, with Green Death Flavor being the latest. With constantly grinding the game the month leading up to his 122.58, he decided to keep pushing. The following month, he would improve his record 2 more times in the span of a week, first on February 10th, and secondly on February 16th. The first of the pair sees Green Death Flavor getting a slightly faster boss kill, cleaning up many of his mistakes from his last attempt, and adding back in Sandbar. This led to a ginormous improvement by 15 seconds with a 122.43. Another subtle tidbit you may not notice being done now is something revolving Sunken Ghost Ship. This run gets a score above 1 million before entering the last room in said ship. Why is such a specific thing important? Well, you may notice that the very last room in particular is very laggy due to the sheer amount of enemies popping up around you. Additionally, people were able to put together that game lag can change based on the digits in your score. The higher the digits, the more likely there will be lag you'll deal with, especially in already laggy sections of the game, such as Force of Illusion 2 or Sunken Ghost ghost ship. The idea now was to reach a score of at least 1 million at some point before entering the ghost ship, since that is a pretty reasonable thing you can do with how late the level is into the run. A score of 1 million is going to cause way less lag than a score of 999,999 due to the way lower digits. It doesn't completely matter when you do this exactly, but the exact score of 1 million is technically the most ideal. Moving to the second run, he lost some considerable time between fighting Vanilla Dome 2 Clip and having troubles with both wings and special. Things quickly picked up after that with a faster boss kill, and doing a new strategy in Mondo, which allows you to keep running right to grab P-Speed quicker. Previously, everyone got speed by doing a left-right movement. With wings and first try clips in Forest, he was able to put himself back on a pace ahead of record, which sadly weakened after he accidentally spin jumped on the yellow blocks at the end of Larry. Nonetheless, it was still enough for a small improvement with a 122.41. The top 10 is nice and all, but no one here is necessary going forward, at least in terms of the world record. In fact, we need to move all the way down to 77th to find that. Why is Louis with a 77th place time clocking in at 1 hour and 47 minutes important? Well, he started to quickly become a promising player. He ran a healthy mix of categories between 2016 and 17, spanning from the multiple variants of 11 exit all the way up to 95 no cape, which yes, is the no cape version of this category. Louis would also keep working on his 96 exit time, but before I do that, let me emphasize how much potential he had from the very beginning. His 147 was able to achieve the same Cookie Mountain boss kill that Green Death Flavor had previously tried to add, but failed. He chopped his time quite quickly and easily went into the 120s. By July, he was already able to nearly approach the top 20. By this point, he was already mixing in both Mario 1 and 3, but was still continuously lowering his Mario World times as well. By September, he was able to breach into the 96 exit top 10. Back in April, a new top 3 had already formed, thanks to Akisto and Truman, but by November, Louis would sneak into that as well. In the span of a year, he went from not having any times to already being a record contender. In fact, at this point, he had already beaten the world record in all castles by 3 seconds. With how high up he was on the 96 board, he kept going, and on December 3rd, bumped himself up to 2nd, and then on the 9th, 122.21. A 20-second improvement to the category. How did so much time get saved? Well, he had a new arsenal of strats versus Green Death Flavor. First is a minor optimization in Red Switch. Instead of simply jumping over the brown blocks, Louis decides to immediately press the P switch and navigate past the enemies. He also goes for a pipe fly in a similar vein to how Donut Plains 2 works. I should mention by this point it had been normalized to use pipe and door flies in a handful of places, such as Switch Palaces, Chocolate Island 2, and exiting a handful of other levels. Additionally, Louis added back in Raskip, unlike the previous record, and had a way cleaner special world between Wings and Boss Kill. His sloppiest split was in Forest, where he failed to even set up Wings, and missed clipping right away, but then went for a backup. At this point, he still had managed to keep a majority of the time save he accumulated in Special, but leaving Wendy is when the lead started growing more than you could ever imagine. To end it off, he went for a strategy in the last room of Larry that scrolls the screen 3 separate times. And of course, he went for Sandbar. This gave him the 20-second time cut. For the first few months of the new year in 2018, Louis mostly took a break from Super Mario World and was primarily running A Link to the Past, and mixing in other games like Mario 3. By the middle of the year, the top of the 96 board included Paco peeking into the top 3, and Sten slightly improving. In fact, in the months after, it changed rapidly, with having a 122 now being a requirement in the top 7. We also saw a new record. One of the biggest additions by far was including the previously messed with boss kill in Cookie Mountain, but the most important was probably a route change in Star World. Instead of feeding Blue Yoshi in Star World 2, Louis went slightly out of his way to grab a yellow Yoshi in Star World 5. This route included Louis doing the normal exit of Star World 1 on the way to Star World 5, instead of doing it before approaching Star World 2, which saves a slight bit of time. With Wings and Gnarly turning Yoshi blue, grabbing Blue Yoshi was not necessary in Star World anymore. This route change has been mainly dubbed with the silly name Yellow Yossi-chan. In Awesome, you'll see Louis grab a Fire Flower early in the level, and try to do something with the red shell. This may make no sense simply watching, but if we rewind 2 weeks prior, it does. A Super Mario World tool assister by the name Bruno Viznaughty, I really hope I didn't butcher that, had been working on an updated run for 96 Exit using updated knowledge and glitches, and on July 18th had posted a snippet showing his progress in Star and Special World. The biggest thing that stood out by far was a new way to finish the level Awesome. This is a similar concept to spawning a boss for boss kills, but instead spawns a Reznor. While obviously no human in real time would execute this the same exact way as the tool assist, runners immediately took interest since boss kills were already normalized at this point. It only took a few days, and by the 22nd, IsoFrieze, who you may know for a plethora of things such as making the SMW practice card, became the first human to execute this live, and was quickly able to put together an explanation that was easy for others to replicate. This immediately proved to be roughly 7 seconds faster when cleanly done. Unfortunately for now, this was yet to be added into 96, as Louis struggled a little in Special. He most notably failed the flight takeoff starting way cool. While he was behind exiting Special, he gained momentum afterwards. He had a new Best Ludwig segment, and had a clean forest, getting wings and perfect clips. This led him to being very close to a 121 pace leaving the world. He unfortunately cut this lead by a considerable amount, with mistakes such as accidentally doing a normal fly in Wendy, and having trouble killing the final Chuck in Valley Bowser 1. Additionally, instead of going for the sandbar clip you may expect, he went for a backup right after that to save the run. This was enough to still give him an 8-second lead, finishing off with a 122.12. After lowering the 96 exit record by over 3 seconds total, Louis spent the rest of the year mostly grinding out Donkey Kong Country 2 and more Mario 3. Regarding the very tippy top of the leaderboard, the end of the year was similar to the last. The top 3 saw an immediate shift, with Sten and Akisto both getting 122.30 times, but still couldn't rival the large improvement Louis cemented into the run. 2018 saw 2 other 122s, with another from Truman, and a completely new challenger, Maiba. Unfortunately, Maiba is the type of runner who tends to not properly submit times until they get really good, which happens surprisingly quick. We can see in October they had a high 123 time, which then rapidly became the 122 I just mentioned. In the category No Star World, he had already poked into the top 3, easily capable of record here. Already rapidly climbing every leaderboard, 2019 started off on a high note, and Maiba scored top 3 in all castles, 6th place in small only, and most important, 122.16 in 96. Only 4 seconds behind Louis. Maiba became the first person in a year that truly seemed like they had what it takes to dethrone the top. Looking at his splits for the run, he was actually ahead of Louis exiting World 6. Unfortunately, due to failing Sexy Slide and Ghost House, and losing Cape and Larry, it was just enough to keep the record in Louis' hands for even longer. And how much longer? Well, another 122 was added to the already growing list, but it wasn't until May 3rd till truly exciting things happened. Entering May, Maiba was already adopting many of Louis' newer strategies, such as faster red switch, yellow Yoshi, and awesome Reznor kill. He also went for a faster setup in Groovy for boss kill. Exiting Wendy, he once again was on a pace that could have netted him a 121, but unfortunately he lost a bit of time in the last couple splits against Louis, the most notable being not door flying in Ghost House, and accidentally rubbing against a pencil and Larry. This still resulted in a 122.03. In the same month, Louis had made a more proper return to the game, and pretty quickly was able to chip down his own time again. In June, he got a 122.07 and a 122.04. The latter saw a slightly slow World 3, and also bleeded more time with things such as messing up Forest Wings. Even with 2 best segments finishing the run, it still wasn't enough to beat the time 1 second ahead of him now. Forwarding to July, he was able to improve his own All Castles record, and while he was in the zone, had this in the same week. Vanilla Dome 1 wings with a 380 grab, the fastest in a record yet, Cookie Mountain boss kill, a failed attempt at awesome Reznor kill, the faster Groovy boss kill, and of course ended the run with a sandbar. This concluded with a 121.57. This was not only a new minute barrier, but was roughly 50 seconds faster than what the record was when Louis started. He really had come a long way in such a short time. Even with such a big milestone being broken, this run still had plenty to nitpick. Even past the Reznor kill attempt, he failed Forest Wings and lost Cape and Chocolate Ghost House, which led to him doing a backup. Following another new minute barrier, the top of the leaderboards remained really calm for the rest of the year, at least in 96. All Castles was very healthy, with the top 5 being set during the year. Maiba got 3rd, and besides that, there wasn't much until 2020, where he started running a bunch of Mario 3. He got shockingly close to the 100% record there, but let's talk about the 100% record at hand here. Louis went a similar route, and did a mix of the games I already mentioned, such as Donkey Kong Country 2. In March 2020, we did see him touch Mario World again, but Maiba was also putting in some work, and 11 months after Louis had a clean World 3, a couple boss kills, cleaned up some previous mistakes in Chocolate Island, and finally added in Doorfly to Ghost House, unlike his last run. This was enough to edge Louie out by 5 seconds, with a 121.52. While it was a nice improvement, he also wasted time failing Awesome Reznor Kill, struggled slightly as Star World 1, and failed Forest Wings. He also had a couple close calls between the endings of Forest Fort and Larry. At this rate, Louie was already back with full force in Super Mario World. He achieved the 95 exit no cape record after losing his 96, and immediately focused on getting said record back afterwards. It would only take a month, and on July 26 had a similar run to Maiba. He had the decent World 3, the pair of boss kills, and missed the new Reznor kill yet again. He additionally got Forestlings unlike Maiba, but had a couple unsuccessful clip attempts. Nonetheless, it was still enough to barely snag the record back by a single second, 121.51. In the same month, multiple people in the now 122 filled top 10 got new times, but nothing that would challenge Maiba or Louie. In fact, it may seem weird how extra active 96 got starting in June, but it's actually because there was a 96 exit tournament taking place to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the game. Both Maiba and Louie were actively practicing for this, which led to an even higher potential than usual for new times. Louie had already proved this with his 121.51, but would cement this only a few weeks later. For the first time, we finally get to see Awesome Reznor Kill added to the rotation, with the rest of the typical tricks going pretty well for the most part. He may have messed up a clip, fought a Chuck and Valley Bowser 1, failed Sexy Slide twice in Ghost House, but after using the backup sandbar strategy once more, he created a greater gap this time with a 121.44. Alright, so at this point we are already into late 2020, and I want to frame where the entire community is at this point. You may have noticed with Maiba competing at the top that they were the first Japanese player in 7 years to dominate the category. In fact, only 10 days after Louie, he got a new personal best that kept him only 5 seconds behind. Starting around this time, many other Japanese runners started climbing up the leaderboards. While the Japanese community had had some of their own unique leaderboards, it wasn't until the tail end of the 2010s that more migrated to Speedrun.com, which most speedrunners were already using. The two biggest powerhouses at this time became Oosui and Oosui, with both of them dominating the top 2 in the No Star World category by the beginning of 2021. With Maiba slowly lowering the record in all castles at the same time, he was still very much in the mix. He would lower his own new record in the same category only a month later, and just a week after that, was finally able to achieve a 96 exit, what he had been trying to do for half a year now. He had some hiccups between Vanilla Dome 2, Ludwig, and Forest, but this was no issue with being able to do every boss kill on the menu, and having as good of a World 7 as you'd like to see. His final time? 121.43. Now you may recall, Louie's record was a 121.44. That's a 1 second difference. But how far apart were the two times? How much would you guess? Half a second? A third of a second? A tenth? No, it's just 5 frames faster. It's such a minor improvement, but it's true. No matter how you time it, it was a new record by under a tenth of a second. It may have not been much, but of course it was enough for Maiba to reign supreme once again. Now, I've already established how prevalent the Japanese community was becoming once more, but to emphasize it, by this point in the year there were now 3 main leaderboard categories which had top 10s composed of at least half Japanese players: All Castles, No Star World, and Small Only. If you crank it back only 1 year to the beginning of 2020, this isn't the case at all, with the only noticeable board being No Star World, which was already a favored category in Japan versus Western players who for the last few years were preferring All Castles. With 96 exit, Japanese runners didn't seem to be eager to tackle this leaderboard as quickly. Besides Maiba, there was one other Japanese runner that was able to peak into the top 10. Besides that, there was only one other in the entire top 50. It wouldn't be that long for that to flip though, as only a few months later in April we see a runner we already mentioned slip into the top 10, Oosui. He was able to very quickly get a 122 time. Similar to some other runners I've already talked about, he repeatedly was shaving his time down and had a couple more 122s, and in May became the third ever person to get a 121. At this point it was safe to say that Oosui was now a main contender. He had already gotten the record in both No Star World and All Castles, where he got the first ever 33-minute time there. In fact, a day after his 33.59 would lead to something far more relevant to our story. With his continuous improvement in 96, you best bet he was still doing more. He had an advantage in Cookie Mountain with a faster boss kill setup, and executed every other major glitch perfectly. He He had a couple minor struggles such as Star World 1, but it was enough to finish with a 1:21:43, the exact same time as Maiba, except Oosui was 0.2 of a second faster. It's quite remarkable in a category as long as this with plenty of mistakes that this is now the second time we have seen such an unbelievable close rivalry. Oosui was on a hot streak at this point, and improved the No Star World record twice by the end of the month. He also ran a mix of other more miscellaneous categories. His most ambitious was 960 exit, which you may be able to take a guess at. 10 96 exit runs back to back. He actually took the record in that by a slight margin, with Green Death Flavor previously having it. During this time, he was still repeatedly mixing 96 exit into his run rotation, and because of that, our next stop isn't too far away. On August 1st, we see a run very similar to before, with some simple swaps of where time was lost and gained. In this case, he had a slower Cookie Mountain boss kill, and had a slightly slow Gnarly, but made up for it by having an amazing Star World 1. In Forest, he had wings and a good first clip, but sadly missed the second clip. He was able to back this up with a clip on the left side. With the rest of the run being pretty well rounded, it was decent enough to create a bigger gap from Maiba this time, with a 1:21:39. At this rate, the category was in a similar situation to before, optimize the newest glitches, and clean up everything in between. With previously less significant levels being perfected even further, the run as a whole has visually become more and more interesting, with my favorite from this run being the end of Valley of Bowser 1. Over the following few months, the 96 board remained pretty dormant towards the top, following Osui's latest improvement, but that was quite the opposite in regards to No Star World, which was seeing repeatedly new times towards the very tippy top. While Oosui was a part of this No Star World competition, it doesn't mean he 100% gave up on 96, because by the end of the year, on December 27th, we got another sizable improvement. He had a rough beginning with a missed block duplication attempt for Vanilla Dome 1 wings, and struggled a few times with Vanilla Dome 2 clip, but he kept things well together thanks to making up for his previous mistakes. His Cookie Mountain boss kill was as good as you'd expect, with his special world being equally clean this time. The only very noticeable time loss from this point was in Valley Bowser 3, where he briefly lost flight. One cool new level approach was in Valley Fort towards the very beginning, where you can move forward earlier while preserving your flight speed. It looks quite scary. Anyways, the great middle stretch of this run was enough for a 1:21:33. Hold on to your horses, cause 2021 isn't completely over yet. In fact, it was Maiba's turn to shine once again. He was still grinding 96, and only 3 days after Oosui on December 30th had a successful attempt. His run had an interesting mix of strategies, such as opting out of Raskip in Vanilla Dome 3, and in Force of Illusion 1 getting a quicker Yoshi grab by spawning 2 Yoshis at once. In this run, it causes a funny visual glitch where Yoshi doesn't have wings when using a blue shell. His one huge time loss here was in Cookie Mountain, where he accidentally took damage during the boss kill. He was able to improv the end and quickly grab the cape in the process. Using similar strategies as Oosui, such as the newest Valley Fort approach, it led to a 1:21:26, now being closer to the next minute barrier. At this point, Maiba and Oosui became rivals amongst multiple of the top categories, and like any rivalry, this would very much continue. Not too far into the year, Oosui was comfortably sitting in first in both All Castles and No Star World, but the one he had been missing for over a month now, 96. At this point, you may wonder where we even go. Sure, you can just keep overly optimizing individual levels, but that can only do so much. Fortunately for you, yes you, the viewer, something new was in the works. Remember when Sandbar Clip in Valley Bowser 2 started to be used way back when? What if there was even more to it? For quite a while, people knew that when duplicating this wing block, you could get a key. And what if I told you this one thing would lead to more time save? For years, people already knew that you could use this key to clip into the sandbar section. This was mostly messed with as Small Mario, since sandbar clip is impossible in that case normally. Besides that, no one took the time to seriously investigate if using a key could actually save time. Until now. I should note that this entire time, it was known that you could clip through the sandbar in this room 3 times, but the sheer difficulty of it in a full run setting scared off runners from trying it. Oh yeah, on top of this, it allows you to clip through the ceiling in the following room as well, which allows you to access the keyhole section immediately. This was immediately dubbed Nibna Clip, which seems to stem from a name in the Japanese community. Players immediately were seeing way higher consistency of clipping when grabbing a shell to duplicate a key. One player taking advantage of this was Oosui, and I think you can see where this is going. Not too far into 2022, on February 21st, he had a run that very quickly was able to stay ahead of Maiba thanks to cleaning up mistakes such as taking damage in Cookie Mountain. He did have some slight hiccups such as the World 2 clip, but jeez, the rest of this run was really clean. He virtually tied his best ever World 5 segment, and I think you can imagine how World 7 looked now. He used the new Nibna clip trick, which led him to pulling even further ahead than he already was. This not only resulted in Oosui's best ever World 7 by 4 seconds, but gave him a 9-second world record improvement, ending with a 121.17. It's crazy that 8 years after Sandbar clip was first used to get the first 123, it would get completely restructured with a low 121. With what feels like a flawless second half of the run, this time was very strong. In fact, it was strong enough to stay the record for the rest of 2022. It's important to know that the top of the leaderboard in general became pretty dormant at this time. If you want to see any new times after Oosui's record this year, you had to hop out of the top 10. I can tell you this was quite the opposite case for many other of the main categories, with Oosui improving the records in All Castles, No Star World, and additionally now Lunar Dragon, which I mentioned before as being the lesser played variant of 96. So 2022 is over and we still have the same exact time sitting here. So where next? Well, as of making this, I fortunately still have one more time to talk about. It may have taken 13 months, but on March 26, 2023, Oosui returned with a new 96 time once more. Out of World 3, he pulled ahead of his record, and was able to maintain his lead. Having a way cleaner Gnarly and Tubular this time around majorly helped, and out of Special was on a pace creeping towards a 120. He kept this amazing pace all the way till Forest, where unfortunately he spent 4 attempts trying to get Wings, which unfortunately cost a ton of time. Nonetheless, his lead was huge enough before that he was able to stay on record pace either way. From this point forward, he really pulled the run together. He even got his fastest World 6 segment here by a slim margin. Exiting Larry, he gained about a second of time save, and the main thing at this point was executing the new Nimna clip, squeezing through the fort, and demolishing Bowser. Doing all this concluded with a 121.10, still a giant improvement considering how tight the run was getting. While writing this is where the record sits, which leads to the question, where do we go from here? Well, if you take a peek at Oosui's splits, you can clearly see that a 120 is more than possible. In fact, if he had broken even on his Forest split, it would have been just enough to get a 120.59. Besides just optimizing simple movement from level to level, this game over the years has kept on giving in the form of glitches. In fact, there are a ton of tricks that humans have already done, but have been deemed not worth it in runs yet for one reason or another. The main reason being its difficulty. The first of those tricks I immediately think of is Forest Ghost House clip. By dropping a cape feather, jumping into an Eerie to shrink, and then turning around and jumping with P-speed, you can collect this cape against the wall and do what is an upward corner clip. I just described this in a very simplified way, and it should be very obvious why this hasn't been done in runs. Besides it being very precise, the route would have to change in one way or another due to the power-up usage here. With this level having 2 exits, this can be executed twice, and can save you well in the 10 to 20 second range. This is a big enough time save that people since the very beginning have debated not if, but when will this be added. A cool tidbit I want to throw in is that our friend from earlier, LinkDead, was the first to do this in real time. If you want a trick that has already comfortably been done in top level runs, then I can also touch upon Valley of Bowser 1 Wings. Oosui did this in a No Reset run a week before his last record. I think I'll just let the footage explain how ridiculous this trick is for being so late into the run. This trick is very realistic in potential future runs, since Maiba during the scripting of this video set a new No Star World record using this. This can save you over 10 seconds. There are some other potential spots to throw Wings into runs as well, such as Star World 3, which may not be as significant as the previously mentioned tricks, but are very possible to add down the road. I could probably keep going on and on about potential future strategies, but the last currently plausible one that I will briefly mention is in Chocolate Island 2. The normal exit requires you to wait for the in-game timer to go below 250 in order to enter the room that leads you to the goal tape. This leads to a lot of waiting. Instead, what if you could spawn a message block that activates the Swish Palace event? To get the most time save out of this, you have to reset the console so that the message immediately ends the level. But even if not doing that, it can still save a ton of time due to how much you normally have to wait in the level anyways. Interestingly, if you decide not to reset, this can only be done in the Japanese version, as this will soft lock without resetting on the American cart. IsoFrieze, who is the person that has experimented with this the most in real time, has stated that the no reset version of this can still save you around 20 seconds. Like many things, there's a whole technical side to this, and I'll keep it to people like him to explain it accurately. Over the last 2 decades, this one specific run of one of the best games of all time has dramatically been transformed many times. For context of how far we have come, the first record with video proof we mentioned from GameCube doesn't even crack the top 100 anymore. To pile onto that, Menboo's last best time isn't in the top 30, the first ever sandbar clip run has been pushed out of the top 25, and the first ever 122 times can't even get you top 15 now. These times will only get pushed lower and lower down the boards. What really has constantly drawn me into the category over the years is how dynamic it is. Whether you're going for a top time or just simply trying to finish a run, you get to pick the strategies you want to go for. With the constant discovery of new strategies, these options continue to grow, and I really encourage you, even if just casually, to sit down and beat all 96 exits in one sitting. It is a rewarding challenge that I suggest everyone should do at least once. This was the history of what I consider to be Super Mario World's most exciting run. Thank you so much for watching.